The Supreme Court will address the historic question of presidential immunity. Without presidential immunity, the president cannot function, as his political opponents will blackmail and extort him with the threat of wrongful persecution at every turn, including when he leaves office. They're going to say, you don't give us this, whether it's for taxes or military or anything, we're going to go get you because we're allowed to now because you wouldn't have immunity. We're going to get you after you leave office. It literally would be blackmail. We look forward to presenting our case in the Supreme Court. It's going to be one of the most important cases because without presidential immunity, you have nothing. You don't have a president. You have just a ceremonial position, and we can't have that. A president has to be strong, has to be powerful, has to make good decisions. But if you don't have presidential immunity, if you don't have a strong form of immunity, you're not going to have anything. You're not going to have a president that can function.
We're going to get out of that commercial break because we have word that the Supreme Court has issued a ruling on the extent of presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during the tenure of President Trump. This is the big one we've been waiting for. It's consequential. It's really interesting that the Supreme Court in 248 years of our history has never actually ruled on this. So it is big and sweeping. And I have our political panel looking over this right now. Andy McCarthy, Chief Justice John Roberts has the writing on this. He's got the pen. Is that significant?
It's very significant. It's the most important case of the term in terms of the long-term interests of the executive branch, in terms of the short-term interests of Donald Trump. And it looks like, at least within the bounds of clear executive authority, what Chief Justice Roberts is saying is that the president clearly has immunity from prosecution.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I gotta tell you guys, I am loving what is happening right now in politics, okay? I am the happiest I've been in a long time in regards to what I'm seeing and how things are progressing going into the election, okay? The Democrat Party is currently fighting a civil war between the progressives and the establishment when it comes to Israel and Gaza. Now, another battlefront in the Democrat civil war has opened up when it comes to whether or not Joe Biden should be replaced by somebody else, okay? You have people that are in Biden's camp saying, no, he should be the nominee. And then you have people saying that Biden shouldn't be the nominee because he's not mentally fit enough to be in office and that he's going to lose to Trump, okay? So, again, there's a full-blown Democrat civil war. Now, on the side, you also have the Supreme Court and their upcoming decisions that Democrats are panicking over. And one of them was the question of whether or not President Trump, as President of the United States, had absolute immunity. Now, again, this is important because Jack Smith is prosecuting Trump for acts that some people say are official presidential acts that Trump took on January 6th and as President of the United States. Now, the Supreme Court had to decide whether or not Trump was immune, okay? Is Trump immune from being prosecuted when he's acting as President of the United States? Well, they have now officially made a ruling, and in a nutshell, they went with the ruling that everybody kind of thought they would go with, which is to grant the president immunity for official acts, but for non-official acts or private actions, the president doesn't get immunity, okay? So now they have remanded the decision back down to the lower courts for the district court to decide what's official act and what is non-official act when it comes to what happened on January 6th and the charges against Trump, the behaviors, the actions that are a part of the indictment from Jack Smith. So the main takeaway from this, guys, is that this essentially guarantees that this case, the January 6th case, will not happen before the election. That is the main takeaway, okay? I mean, the point of this video is not to get into the legal details of the ruling and what it means for future presidents, because quite honestly, that's just not my wheelhouse. But just understand, although the Supreme Court did not give Trump exactly what he was looking for, everything they were asking for, which is complete and total immunity, well, when it comes to official acts, however, again, the president does have immunity according to the Supreme Court, and the Trump team definitely sees this as a W. Maybe not a big W, but a small W, but a W nonetheless.
don't come out and get targeted and criminally and civilly sued. It's incredibly important. It was a good decision. Obviously, I believe absolute immunity should exist for the executive branch, but they did recognize it. And the presumptive immunity now will then get outlined, kicked back down to the courts, and they will look at it. But the presumption that any president and President Trump was acting within the perimeter, the outer perimeter of his official acts, is clear through this decision from what I've read so far. Obviously, I'll examine it and speak about it further on the network, but I think that this was a very good decision for us.
Alina, it's Brett Baer. The AP writes it this way. They say Supreme Court sends Trump's immunity case back to a lower court in Washington, dimming prospect of a pre-election trial. I mean, is that what you all are hoping for? And that would be the end result, is that anything gets past the election on any of these cases that are pending?
You know, Brett, let me first start by saying that the team here, the legal team for President Trump, and I think the American people think that these cases should never have existed. Let's just be clear. But now we are in this political attack on a leading candidate because they can't win with their candidate. So we are where we are. Now, as an attorney, as a legal spokesperson, I would just say this. Of course, it is a good day when the Supreme Court recognizes constitutional rights of presidents and the executive branch, but we should never have been in this situation to start with. This is a disgrace to America. So yes, the lower courts, again, will have to hear it. It will, in my opinion, slow down Jack Smith's persecution and selective prosecution of President Trump. And I don't see how this case could go forward before the election.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay, so the Trump team obviously thinks that this is a good outcome, okay, because, hey, the Supreme Court has given the president at least some immunity. Now, again, it's just about which acts that were conducted on January 6th were actually official acts versus, again, actions that can be characterized as private acts. Really don't know yet, okay, that is to be decided. But, again, it's almost guaranteed now that the trial will not happen for the election. And I think that that is the big takeaway that people should come away with here, because if that is the case, it seems like Democrats in their hopes of actually getting Trump convicted on charges that people care about is over, right? It's absolutely over, okay? And it just seems like Democrats have just taken L after L after L lately. Even CNN is admitting that, this decision means that we're probably not going to see that trial happen before the election.
From the Roberts written decision, he says, quote, Trump asserts a far broader immunity than the limited one we have recognized, meaning the court. The text of the clause provides little support for the absolute immunity claim that Trump asserts. So they're rejecting that. But
yeah, so here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. So when the liberal media comes out here and says, oh, my God, the Supreme Court is a MAGA court, right? They're acting on behalf of Trump. No, if you actually understand the ruling, they actually did not rule in favor of Trump, right? They did not go with Trump's complete argument. Essentially, they said, listen, there are some things the president is immune from. There's some things the president is not immune from. But that has to be decided by the lower courts in regards to what are the official acts and what are the private acts that Trump participated in on January 6th that is related to the indictment. It's really that simple.
In essence, all of the details as to the allegations made, the accusations made in the Jack Smith indictment of Donald Trump, not all of them, but many of them, the court is saying, we are sending this back to the district court. They have to decide whether Trump's communications with the American people, calling them to rally to the Capitol on January 6th, and everything that happened after that, the disruption of the counting of the electoral votes, the sham electors scheme, all of that, whether or not that's an official act, has to be determined by the U.S. District Court. And Ellie Honig, you were saying what's most significant about that is the U.S. Supreme Court could have said, we're remanding this to the district court, to the lower court, and whatever they say goes, and we will uphold that. They didn't say that.
Exactly. To the contrary. This case will not go before the election. It will not be tried before the election, and here's why. Supreme Court has just said there is such thing as criminal immunity. The test, as we anticipated, is essentially official acts versus unofficial acts. We're sending it back to the district court, and this is an important detail, the court says several times, whatever the district court finds can be appealed before trial. Jack Smith had made an argument of, well, maybe the district judge, the trial judge can work it out and send it to the jury, and then the jury can separate official from unofficial acts. Several times in this opinion, the Supreme Court, the majority, says explicitly whatever the judge decides about what's official or unofficial, what's immune or not immune, that can be appealed back up. 0% chance that happens before November.
So why do that? I mean, if they are saying, hey, we're the U.S. Supreme Court and we're going to have the final say on this no matter what, why not just make it clear? Everything's delineated in the indictment. Why not just make it clear? And if Judge Chutkan decides X, Y, or Z, we will agree with that. Why not just be explicit?
Because the Supreme Court, they're in a court of appeals. They want to see a record, right? And I think with Judge Chutkan just kind of dismissing out of hand all conduct whatsoever, the president has no immunity for all criminal conduct, for any criminal conduct. They've gone back and said, no, you need to go look at this, and then come back to us based upon what we've said in this opinion.
And the other thing, AKA, they don't trust her, right? They don't trust her. Okay, so they're saying, listen, if you don't agree, aka the Trump team doesn't agree with whatever Judge Chutkan comes up with, because clearly she believes that the president's not immune from anything at all, then hey, you know what? You can come back to us and we will overturn it if we don't agree with it, right? So they've opened up the avenue here to essentially have this continue to be drawn out and delayed because it can be appealed. So again, it's not happening before the election. And again, part of it is Judge Chutkan's fault because again, she tried to issue a ruling that would try to speed run the case, okay, which is what they did out there in New York to get it to trial. Right? So again, this is Democrats and these liberal judges, these activist judges, again, trying to do a rush job here. It's backfiring. Just like it's backfiring with the classified documents case. You cannot do a rush job when you're talking about trying to prosecute the former president of the United States. It doesn't make sense, right? Things are going to move at a slow pace as they should. But again, the goal here, guys, is not to have a fair trial that is legally sound, a decision, a verdict that people can actually trust and believe that, okay, this is the right verdict. No, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to do a slop job, rush job, get it to trial, get Trump convicted, going into the election. This is why all of these cases were lined up right before the election. They tried to line them up right before the election, and then they realized that, oh, wait, we're going to have too many legal obstacles in the way to actually get it done before the election. Now they want to boo-hoo, whine, and cry about the system doing what the system is supposed to do in this case, which is to make sure that the defendant has a fair trial, right? Now, again, if these individuals weren't coordinating with each other to try to get Trump convicted right before the election, who knows? They could have done this a long time ago, right? They could have come out to Trump years ago and would have had the time to actually work out these questions and these issues before going to trial. And you probably would have had a trial happen before the election. But because they didn't want to do it too early, right? They wanted the maximum impact. This is all political. They tried to line it up to happen right before the election, and it turns out that they missed, right? That is what is happening here, okay? That's exactly what's happening, and it's hilarious.
It's the right and rules governing when and how to appeal aren't set in stone or aren't entirely clear. And I think they felt some need to delineate that this is an appealable order. They aren't always. And sometimes some things you have to wait to appeal until the end of a trial. They're giving whoever it is, and probably Trump, the opportunity to appeal during trial.
Well, let me ask you, do you think that if Judge Chutkan had ruled differently initially and said basically closer to this, the conversations with the Justice Department are clearly official acts. I'm not going to count them, but the other ones, like if there had been a less of a sweeping, of course he can be indicted on any of this stuff, ruling by Judge Chutkan, would this not have been ended up where it was today? Did she open the door for a decision like this?
She did. I think Judge Chutkan's going to have a lot of regret. When she issued her opinion, it just said there's no such thing as automatic immunity for everything a president does his whole 4 years. When I was reading that, I said, okay, where's Part B? I expected Part B to be, and I find, having reviewed the record and reviewed the documents, and I find that even if there is such thing as immunity, he was outside the scope. And by the way, that's what the Court of Appeals did on their ruling. The problem is, as Jim was saying, The Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, they're not fact finders. This can only be done at the district court level. And so I suspect Judge Chutkan is feeling some regret. It wasn't like it was some leap of logic that she should do that. This happens. There are hearings. For example, in the Georgia case, Mark Meadows is trying to get his case moved over to federal court. The question there is almost the same thing. Was Mark Meadows in or out of the scope? You know what the federal judge did there in Georgia? He held a hearing. Mark Meadows testified. He said, I find based on this hearing, you're outside the scope. If Judge Chutkan had done that, we'd be in a very different position.
Where I don't agree with that.
Well, again, see, the problem is she didn't want to do that because that would take more time. Again, the point was to try to get these trials to happen before the election. So again, her in cahoots with the Democrat Party, this liberal black woman judge, right? She decides to issue a sloppy ruling, right? That's open to be appealable like this because she didn't want to take the time to do what Judge Aileen Cannon is doing right now that the mainstream liberal media is complaining about, which is to go through the process of making sure that, hey, this is fair and legally sound. See, they're boohoo-whining and crying about what Judge Aileen Cannon is doing. But you see what Judge Chutkan did because she tried to speed run it. That opened up the opportunity for this to happen, right? For it to be delayed even more. Again, it's just so funny how that works. It's hilarious. So with that being said, let's check in on MSNBC because we know that they're not doing too well when it comes to this opinion here, okay? They're actually going to read the dissent from Justice Sotomayor. She's going to cry about the conservative majority not agreeing with her, right? Which is what liberals typically do when they don't get their way. They boo-hoo whine and cry about it.
Specifics that were argued in court. She says, looking beyond the fate of this particular prosecution, the long-term consequences of today's decision are stark. The court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interests, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interests of the nation. The president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon. Immune, 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 immune. Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends. Because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That's a quote from the majority opinion that she's using here. That is the majority's message today. Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. That is all from Justice Sotomayor's dissent. Neil, she's arguing that he can assassinate somebody now. Is that what this majority opinion is saying?
Yes, that is basically what she's saying the majority is saying, and I'm sure that is...
Well, I mean, you could technically argue that Obama assassinated American citizens overseas, right? He issued extrajudicial killings of Americans. Is that not an assassination, right? I'm just saying, you know, it depends on what you define as assassination, but yeah, I mean, you know, hey, should Obama be prosecuted for that? It seems as if Justice Sotomayor thinks so, right? If we go with her logic and the logic of the other liberal justices, Obama should be brought up on charges for the extrajudicial killings of Americans. Just saying, right? Nobody's above the law, right? There are no official acts that are immune according to the liberal justices, right? So again, Obama should be standing trial. Just saying. That's how far we can take this.
How Trump will take it. And if you ever were thought about the stakes in November and what they were, this opinion makes them very, very clear. The law is not going to be a check against the next president. And you have to have someone in power who you can trust to execute the laws faithfully and to comply with the Constitution. And, you know, now the stakes are astronomical in a way they might not have been before. This is a a clarion call for the American public to understand the law, the courts are not going to protect us against a president who wants to violate the law. But Supreme Court's basically said, you can do that, just slap the label official act on it, and maybe there'll be a hearing over some pieces of it and not, and there won't even be a hearing when it comes to things like pressuring the Justice Department to break the law and to do what you want for your personal ends. So this is a really grave decision. And I think we should be focused on, Justice Sotomayor's warning and not the, technical details just about what this means for the January 6th prosecutions.
Yeah, well, again, I don't think it's that simple, right? I don't think that the Supreme Court is saying that the President of the United States can do whatever he wants. Clearly, that's not the case because, the trial probably will happen, again, if Trump doesn't become president. They did not give Trump complete immunity. It just means that, hey, we have to separate out what is an official act versus a private act. And who knows? They'll probably find that some parts of what Trump did on January 6th was not an official act. That has to be discussed, hashed out in court, okay, so to speak. So it's not as simple as the mainstream liberal media is making it out to be, that the Supreme Court has essentially made the president the king. That's not the case. They're just saying that, listen, the president needs some immunity in order to do his job, right? To do his job effectively as president of the United States, because he's going to have to make some tough and hard decisions, right? And, I personally think that this is a great thing because it looks more like Trump is definitely going to win, which means that all of this is definitely probably going to go away anyways. It's just hilarious because this is what Democrats were counting on in order to try to take down Trump. Now they're in a situation where they're not getting what they want when it comes to the courts, okay? And now Biden, everybody knows he's a vegetable, okay? So now they have to figure out whether or not they want to replace Joe Biden. And it's just bad, right? It's just an all-around bad situation for Democrats. It is hilarious to watch that party collapse. Everything they threw against Trump not work. It is so glorious to see what is happening right now in politics. We are living in history, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.